Just stay where you are. And we want to hear some of the stories that you've been sharing with each other about why you would put your congregation where you've landed. So let's start over here. Oh, hold on.
Can you just summarize for the people who won't be able to hear them?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Let's hear from the reactive congregations.
Well, all of us are in congregations that, 114 years old, 104, and 70 years old, have been in the same community. A couple of us have come from, it was traditionally a German community or a Danish community. And the church has been there, and the neighborhoods have changed many times over the years. So I think the numbers are dwindling people-wise, but the facility is there.
Okay.
And the facility is providing, the facility or the cemetery or whatever it is still providing a service in the community. But the community is changing, whether it's a farming community, the farms are getting smaller, or whether it's in downtown Calgary, the community has gone down and come back, and there's new life and everything else. The community is constantly changing. And I think all our congregations are just kind of observing what's happening, and we're just there amongst a lot of change.
And I think a lot of energy, at least at Bethany, every council meeting, the focus in the past has always been the bottom line. So that's kind of what everybody, when you leave your meeting, that's what everybody's taking back. In some ways, I think we're transitioning and starting to think beyond that, but basically it's reactive.
One of the pictures of a reactive church is the finances. It's getting smaller, what are we going to do about it? Or if there's money around, you got to put it away in case the roof leaks. The church I went to, which was very reactive, about 30 senior citizens, the treasurer said to me about the second week there, "We don't have any fights here anymore." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, we've learned that if we have another fight and one more person leaves, we won't be able to pay the bills." So kind of reactive. But the other side of the reactive is that it's easy to become a church in which we've always done Lutheran speak. And we do Lutheran speak from a German perspective or a Danish perspective or a Norwegian perspective. And that's okay, but nobody outside anymore knows Lutheran speak or from any of those perspectives. And so it raises the question, what do we do? Anyway, yeah.
As the group online,
They just asked if you could just summarize a little bit,
Okay.
because they can't hear the groups.
okay. So the reactive group has said their congregations have long history in the communities that they're in. Yes, and the community around them has changed considerably. There's a focus on the bottom line. What are we going to do with our finances? And they're aware that the community around them is changing, but they're not changing too much internally. Is that fair? Yeah?
Thank you.
Okay. Let's move to the back. Some stories about developmental churches.
I'll speak in regards to our congregation, which is an urban congregation in a larger city in Edmonton. And we have some elements of all four church types, but my thinking is the primary focus is developmental, because I see things like, well, if we can just get a better Sunday school curriculum, we'll have more kids in Sunday school, and if we just jazz up the choir a bit, our choir will be bigger, and we get those things, everything will be good. So just taking things that have been done in the past and just trying to make them a little bit better. There seems to be a lot of focus on those aspects. Not that we're not doing other things, but there's a lot of focus on those.
Okay. some other stories from the back there.
We struggled which category we should be in, and decided to go rather than reactive into the developmental. But then one of the thoughts I had was that we had to be very careful that we don't pat ourselves on the back too hard that we've made that step, because we're doing things and they're not working, it's still not a good thing.
We haven't said anything yet, but Evelyn and I are from Kesuchan in Innisfail, and we were just quickly talking here and realizing that we have been a reactive church when we took the vote and everybody left. And our focus last year, when the budget was so low and we thought we were going to close the doors, it's like, okay, that's where we were. And we have stepped from that, and I think we're between the developmental and the transitional right now, because we're reaching out, we're doing things that are different, we're putting our trust in God, and we're being led, and we're finding people that have strengths in their ability of music, and they are coming forward, and our choir is starting to develop. And we're having people that are doing Sunday school that were reluctant because they're so tired of doing it for so many years. And we're coming back and giving that out. There's a renewal, and there's a new delight in seeing 2 come, and then 4 come, and being told that the kids are crying if they can't come to school because the parents are too tired and they don't want to bring them. But they're starting to come.
Okay?
That's good news.
And having new ideas to say, okay, our budget is so bad, what are we going to do? And there's a new idea that comes out, and it reaches out into the community, and it's bringing it.
Okay. So just to, let me just recap for the folks online what we've heard from this group so far, and then we'll see if there's any more. So a couple of things. One is stories about if we just make the Sunday school program curriculum better, then people will come. If the choir is boosted up, sound better, people will come. Some groups who are feeling like they're doing these things successfully, which is fantastic, but realizing that they can't just sort of take the pat on the back and sort of sit it out and figure, yeah, we're all good. Some other groups in the developmental type of church who are recognizing that they used to be in the reactive church type and are finding now that they're beginning to find their place as a developmental church. Their place of really retrenching is over, and they're starting to do some new things which are bringing some new people into their churches. Yes.
The church in Fort McMurray says that they are developmental with a touch of transitional, so just the story you heard.
Okay.
And the other congregation has said, our congregations do a lot of things in the community, nation, and the world. We're just beginning to see that our reasons for doing what God is calling us to do can't be to put more bums in the pew.
Okay.
That's those 2 reports.
Great. Okay. Anything more from the developmental group?
Well, further to the comment here, the shepherd shoot read there, and my friend can correct me, but we lost, I think, about a quarter of our congregation with this whole sexual initiation thing. Before that, we lost many people because of the difficulty with the pastor. Then we had a couple years of what they call it, transitional. Well, now I think people have stepped forward to fill the roles. We're moving, people step forward, whether it's collecting for sweaters or whatever. The response is great. I'm just wondering, we're reaching out in terms of what used to be the church population here. And I think that's going well. I don't know about reaching out to our neighbors across the street.
Okay.
And Paul, maybe you would comment if I'm off.
Yeah, no, I think there's certainly an element of I guess whether it's transitional, but like our PBS program, there was a strong effort to invite kids who are our PBS this summer, with no strings attached, just to, we're here, celebrate with us.
Good point.
Okay, so just to recap for the folks online, another story of a church that was struggling, has gone through some difficult times through the same-sex issue in the church, lost a lot of their members, and are now feeling like they're starting to regain their foothold a bit, that they're doing well at reaching out to other church members who were a bit disillusioned, and they're gradually coming back in. They have also been inviting people in the community to come into their church. What the example stated was their Vacation Bible School that was offered in the summertime, where the church invited people in the neighborhood to come in, be part of the Vacation Bible School with no sort of strings attached. Okay, any other stories from the back?
Just one more thing to add to what Carol said.
Yeah.
At the last Bible study, we were talking about, well, what should we be doing? And someone said, well, it sure would be nice to have more young families. And our pastor said, you know, what is it that we do really well? We don't have young families, but we have lots of seniors. And we do a good job with seniors. Maybe we need to be working at trying to develop that niche. And I'm thinking that's something that we can do in the community, it's something we can do within our own church. And to me, that really sort of was a aha moment.
Okay, so a realization in one of the congregations in the developmental group that while there's a desire to see young families, they've recognized that they have a good ministry for seniors. And so what if they focused their efforts on attracting seniors to come to their church? Yeah? Is that fair? Yeah? Okay. Anybody else from back there? Everybody's...
One thing that we have noticed in our church recently is we have a big high school right across the street that has been there since the church was there. We have never had a relationship with the high school. But our pastor has been going to meetings. Some of the leaders, lay leaders in our church have made contacts, and we got some school supplies together. They have a snack program for their high school students. We asked the congregation just absolutely responded over and above. And so I look at those steps of looking around at our congregation and looking where it's located and saying, yeah, you know what, maybe we're on the way.
So my question for you on that would be, when you say that, is it the church imagining what could we do for the kids in the high school?
Well, it's a two-way street.
Okay.
They've got lots of programs that we would like to, particularly in their multimedia. They have students who are willing to do a video for us, and
Okay.
there's some students who we have a community meal program who are would like to help with that community meal as their sort of citizenship service, and we're really open to that.
Okay.
So I think it is very much a two-way street.
So it's a bit of a relationship
Yeah.
that's building between the church and the high school that's across the street. Okay,
The high school is going to produce a video for us to put on our website.
great.
We've been wanting to do that for 2 or 3 years, and so I contacted the lady I know, and I said, do you have a program there? And she said, yeah. And I said, could you get your teacher students to do us a video? And she said, we'd love to, so.
Great, that's great. Okay, let's move to the back group, which is the transitional church. Let's hear some stories from that group.
I think one of the common threads here was that we were not polarized in number 2 and number 4 of the developmental transformational, but we were kind of in between, having elements of both areas. I guess one of our focuses across has been as a result of the same-sex issue at Cineplex, at Nantucket. And study section, and that was fine. And we attracted people as well, so we got through that ourselves, and were able to call a very vibrant pastor couple from the U.S. who have come in from a multicultural area and have a lot of good ideas and are frankly kicking our butts all over the place to get more proactive by getting involved with the community, the community garden business, the schools across the way. They're going to be a challenge to us, and hopefully we can respond in the same way.
Okay.
But they come from a background of really pushing community and outside involvement, so
Okay.
I got a feeling that things are going to change some more.
Great. So just to recap for the folks online, story of the theme behind the back corner is perhaps one of in between developmental and transformational, that there's still some energy being spent on doing some of the attractional things, but also an interest in looking out, and some new leadership in one of the churches there who are really challenging the people in the church to think beyond their own walls. Would that be fair? Yeah, okay. Can we hear some more from the back?
At Athens, we can still see elements of all four, but I think we feel that we're between transitional and transformational. With Pastor Ryan, he has really, really encouraged us to look into the community and what can we do, what's out there that we can be a part of that. So we have the community kitchen we started. We really, I think, we've tried to really look outside ourselves, outside our own walls. At the same time, trying to look after those who are there. And it's exciting. I think for us it's still difficult because we have a certain percentage that they want to be a part of change, they want to be a part of the transformational idea, but they don't want to do the work. They want somebody who, they want our church to do it, but they don't necessarily step up to help do it. So it's a lot of it is the older people grasping the change and being a part of looking into the community. And I mean, we're very fortunate with a lot of retired pastors. Pastor Bowen, who has more energy than anybody, and working with refugees. So we have I think a unique situation in our church.
Okay.
I don't think we lost a lot of people. Pastor Ryan, I think thanks to him, it was not such a big issue in our church, and it allowed us to make the change gracefully.
Okay. So a story of a church who is starting to look out into the community with support from their pastor, who is encouraging them to do that. Some struggles with different people in the church, some who say, yes, we need to move forward in this way, and others saying, yes, we need to move forward in this way, but we don't want to do the work. Yes? And lots of questions, it sounds like. Sort of, we know that we need to be out in the community, and we're not entirely sure what that looks like, or who's going to do it, or how it's going to get done, but we're thinking about that. Yeah?
Yeah, and the enthusiasm, for instance, we started a community kitchen this year. Overwhelming response from people in our church to help with that. So it was a real good clue that, yes, we are ready to, and are doing it, not just thinking about it, we're doing it.
So let me ask you a question about that. Is the community kitchen there designed to meet a need in the community, or is it designed to create an opportunity to develop relationship with the community?
Both.
Both.
We don't have the facilities to do community kitchens like a lot of churches. So every 2 weeks we have people who come, and the first one we had 2 people. We we had 2 people signed up. And in the end, we had 6 different countries they were from. And it was just overwhelming. And right away, dialoguing with them, it wasn't just them coming to learn how to cook Canadian. The people from our church also wanted to learn about how to cook from wherever they came from. So it was to build community, it was to build relationship. It wasn't necessarily just a means of them coming and learning how to cook and going home with a whole bunch of food for them.
Okay.
So it was definitely, the emphasis was on building relationship with the outside community.
Okay, so just to recap for the folks online, the community kitchen that this particular church has started invited people to come and learn about cooking and Canadian cooking and provide them with meals. But it wasn't just about providing for those people coming in, it was also about learning about where those people have come from. What are their traditions? So there's a relationship aspect of it where they're starting to learn about each other so they can learn how to do life together as opposed to the church doing something for these people in the community. Okay. Can we hear from the group that was standing in the middle who was a little bit unsure?
Well, no, we're very sure.
What are you very sure about?
We're all 5 from the same parish,
Okay.
St. Paul's, Rollview. We looked around and it took us about 2 seconds to decide we're traditional. And we could be reactive. We could be some parts of some other churches or some other groups. But I've just been jotting down a few things. Unlike churches who have a budgetary issue, we don't. We have a very healthy surplus. Somehow, miraculously, we dodge the same-sex issue. Just hasn't been an issue. And we do outreach quite a bit. But we don't attract people, although we do have a lot of, I think, great potential. But I just listed some of the things that we outreach for. We help the food bank in Leduc, the women's shelter in Camrose, the Youth Emergency Center in Edmonton, the Hope Mission in Edmonton. We do County Christmas Elves Drive. Last Friday, or a week ago Friday, we had a dinner for Lime in Edmonton, and we're probably responsible for about 4 or 5% of their budget, just from one evening. And we also have some very generous support for the seminary in our church. So we're stagnant in a way, but we really reach out. We do a lot of things.
Okay, so just to recap, sorry, go ahead.
When we go back to the traditional, I think we mean that we're a small congregation that's in a rural area. Everybody's grown up with everybody else. But our congregation is becoming older, and our children are going to an urban area. They're not staying in the rural area. So our congregation is starting to get smaller. And with that being traditional, change was very difficult. We had a pastor that was with us for a long time, much loved. We lost to health issues. And we've got a new pastor that's come in. He's trying to bring in change. And it's very difficult to change the thought with people being accepting of change. But it's slowly starting to work. But it's not a real or easy acceptance, and especially with the older congregation that don't want change.
Okay. So just to recap for the folks online, the group in the middle didn't really know exactly where to place themselves. And so they have lots of things going on. They're not feeling a financial pinch. They haven't been extremely disrupted by the same-sex issue, but they are declining in size. The community around them is changing as their kids move away and are not staying in the rural community, moving into other centers. Yeah.
And we're outreach church too.
Oh yeah, right, sorry. And they also do a lot of outreach. They're plugged in, doing lots of things for the community. Yeah. Okay. Alan, did you want to make any comments about anything you're hearing?
No, I think that's good. I think the story's...
Okay, great. So what we're going to do before lunch, you can come back and sit in your seats.
Most of this process is
We weren't taking our responsibility. Walk away.
So before we,
Question here.
oh, question.
In listening to everybody talk
Yeah.
here, my sort of sense of feeling is all our groups could have been at any one of these,
Yeah,
and some are just more one than the other.
yeah,
So that
that's
basically
okay.
it's the same, we're all the same, really.
It's, part of, he says, where's the primary energy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because yes, we can have elements of each, but, and again, it's, you know, this is not a scientific thing, it's an instinctive, intuitive, but when you think about the church, just, where's the primary energy right now that's going on? And what we generally describe is what you find in reactive and developmental, and I heard some of this in the transitional, is the primary energy is both in being as effective a church as we can, in the hope that if we are effective or we do get grants, people will come and join us. And what we say is, keep doing that. That's really important. But what we're discovering is wherever we go, is that people are less and less likely to simply come and join. And that therefore, we've got to learn some new habits, which is what Luke 10 is about how we go and enter, which is part of Fiona's questions about relationships. So it's where the primary energy is. Anyway.
Okay, yeah.
I'd be very curious to see how our group of late people, how that, those thoughts dovetailed with the clergy yesterday. See what corners, if we'd have been in the same corners.
So the question was, there was a curiosity about where would the respective pastors go in the corners? Yeah. Yeah. We didn't do
Ask
that.
them.
You have to ask them. We didn't do that yesterday. So what I want to do now before we have lunch though is give an overview of the 5-step process. So that's on page 4 of your handouts. And basically what the 5-step process is about is starting to introduce and engage some new practices that take churches whose primary focus is on reactive and move them towards developmental. But for those churches who are developmental, to start to give them some ideas about how they could start practicing their way into becoming more of a transitional congregation. Okay, so that's the sort of framework that we're working in. So if you look at your handout, the first part is preparing the ground. So this is the time where your churches are thinking, is this something that we want to do? And also, if this is something that we want to do, who are the people in our church who we think would be really good at being the team that leads our congregation through this process? Okay? So that's roughly where you are right now. Trying to figure out, okay, is this something that we want to engage in? And if we do, who are the folks in our church who we think would provide some good leadership for our congregation? We'll say more about the role of the guiding teams and the type of people you want to have in your guiding teams a little bit later on. So the first step is listening and attending. Now we've already started practicing that today. We did it with dwelling in the Word. We did it with, as you listen to each other, tell the stories about where your church is at right now. So in the listening stage within the congregations, there's time spent in dwelling in the Word. We also give you a process to follow where you listen to the people in your church. You just sit with them, there's a list of questions that you work through with them, and you take a collection of people in your congregations and you listen to them. Things like, when have they felt most alive in your church? Where do they experience God? All those kinds of questions. And it's purely about listening to the people in your church so that you get a big picture of who you are as a people. Because what we know, as far as looking through to what change looks like, you cannot say, this is where we want you to go. You have to start with where you are right now. And the way you start with where you are right now is to practice listening to each other to make that picture clearer of who your people are and where you are right now. The other thing that we do is provide you with some tools to start listening in your neighborhood. And again, it's not to be making decisions about going here or going there, but just simply being present in your neighborhood and listening and watching to understand what's going on in the neighborhood around your churches. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit more about what this italicized dwelling in the Word means, or what it is?
It's that process that we did this morning. Dwelling in the Word is the exercise that we did this morning, where you spend time dwelling in Luke 10. And what we find is that congregations get involved in using dwelling in the Word as a tool. They certainly use it in all their guiding team meetings, but they also encourage it as something that is used more broadly in the life of their church. So in some churches that I've worked with, they've introduced dwelling in the Word as a way to begin their council meetings, or a way to begin their Bible studies, or they figure out different ways to use that tool in the life of their church. And basically, it's about learning to listen to God through the other. And we took you through an experience of that this morning.
So different, sorry, maybe I should ask this, but what are different parts of Luke 10, or the same?
That same passage.
And
That same
different
passage.
questions associated with
Nope,
that?
same question.
Exactly the same thing.
Yep. Because what we find is the more that people dwell in that text, the more insights that come out, the variety of conversation that happens, and everybody, you hear different things every time there's time spent dwelling in that text. Okay. Then we move into the discerning step. So you're still dwelling in the Word. And then at that point, you're starting to bring together all the listening that you've been doing. So the listening that you've been doing in Scripture, the listening that you have been doing to each other in your congregations, and the listening that you've been doing in your neighborhoods. So you start to bring all the things that you've been hearing together and start to ask the question, what experiments might the Spirit be inviting us to engage in our neighborhoods? And you begin to identify some initial experiments to try in your church. Okay, so that's what the discerning phase looks like. And then we get into experimenting itself. So a few things to say about experimenting. First of all, experiments are not designed, they're not intended to be about the outcome of the experiment. The purpose of the experiment is actually to see what you learn through having had that experience. Now, the experiments are not high-stakes things. They're not complicated. They're simple actions that are coming out of what you've been learning through listening in your neighborhoods and listening in your communities. Experiments, it's all right if they fail, because it's not about the outcome of the experiments. It's what are you learning about your congregation? What are you learning about the neighborhood that your church is in by doing these experiments? And so you'll have people in your church who will be doing these experiments over time, and the purpose is to learn from what you're doing. Because the experiments are not going to necessarily give you the magic clue. They're going to give you ideas about what's happening, but your experiments are not designed to provide solutions for the whole life of your church. That's not what the experiments are about. It's about what can we try to see what we can learn about the life of our church and the life of our church in the context that we find ourselves. Okay? Then you move into the evaluating phase, where you look at your experiments and you go, what did we learn? What would we do the same? What would we do differently? And you share the stories of those experiments. And then after that, we move into living into a new future, where you start to say, okay, so then what are our next experiments? What are we going to try now? And you begin this cycle of trying things and learning. Because what we've learned is that we actually need to practice our way into doing things differently. You can't sort of sit there and go, okay, if we do this, 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 and this, and think your way through it, then it will happen. What you need to do is be trying. Now, one thing that I'll say just quickly before we have lunch is you have this process going on in each of your congregations. But what we've learned through this is that one of the great gifts is that congregations can learn from each other. And typically, congregations don't have a lot of opportunity to learn from each other. So what we do is regularly throughout this process, we bring the guiding teams together from the various congregations, and they spend time with each other, learning from each other, sharing their experiences with each other, as well as learning about how to go forward into the next step. So there is usually a time at the beginning of each step where we're bringing all the guiding teams together so that they can share and build on their experience by listening to what other churches who are also going through the same process are experiencing and what they're learning. So after lunch, we can go through this and answer your questions. We'll talk some more about how change happens and what this whole process can mean for your churches. Okay? Any just brief questions before we break for lunch?
I'm a bit of a slow learner.
Okay.
Self-admitted. I know the first question that's going to be asked at the congregational level is, or the first statement that's going to happen is, I can't do that.
Okay.
I'm not qualified to do that.
Okay.
And I know probably 40 people in our congregation that will say that.
Okay.
What I'm gathering is that today is an introduction to a package.
Mm-hmm.
And so the congregation is not going to have to reinvent the wheel.
Absolutely not going to have to reinvent the wheel. No. We have we have tools and resources and training that we provide throughout the process to guide the congregations as they work their way through this.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That was what I thought, but I didn't want to have any
No, that's
preconceived notions here.
Okay. Julianne, do you want to say a comment about lunch?
Oh,
It's 12 o'clock now.
lunch. Anyone want lunch? Yay. Well, I actually don't need to be in front of the camera. So we're going to eat downstairs. I hope you heard potluck. It will be what it is. We have a few housekeeping things that we need to do. Since we're borrowing the facility, they're kindly letting us use it. We will need to make sure that we pull out the tables if necessary, because we might be bigger than the spot that's down there, but we just have to put it back the way we see it now, which is in a square. I figure we should just pull the tables out and add some more chairs. And 45 minutes.
Yep.
So we'll be back here at 1:45. And I need someone who likes to be present at our table, Lord. Who's a good singer? Oh, come on.
Could we do it to Johnny Appleseed?
You want to do Johnny Appleseed instead?
No, I'm just kidding.
Who does not know the Johnny Appleseed one? Everybody knows it. Okay, let's stand up. Oh, the Lord is good to me. So I thank the Lord for giving me the things I need, the sun and the rain and the apple seed. The Lord is good to me. Amen. 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 Thank you very much. We'll see. Oh. Obviously, I don't know that well enough. Downstairs. upstairs. Thank you all for bringing lunch, and have some fun getting to know one another, and we'll be back in 45 minutes.